Get back in your work box. Excuse me? What box? Apparently, an employee asking whether they can have somewhere quiet to go if they become overwhelmed at something like a company summer party somehow ended up here. And eventually, £12,000. That was the tribunal receipt across the successful claims. And before somebody starts aggressively typing, no, that one sentence was not individually priced at 12 grand. Calm down, legal LinkedIn, we are going to get there. Because here's the weird part. That's not even the most interesting thing I found. Because the tribunal did not find that this manager was deliberately trying to humiliate her. And I actually think that this makes this story more important, because this isn't about some cartoon villain sitting here at their desk, 8:57 in the morning, going, what protected characteristics shall I discriminate against today? No, this is much more normal than that. And honestly, that's worse. Because we spend a lot of time teaching people with rejection sensitivity, maybe you've misunderstood the situation. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe your nervous system is reading rejection where there isn't any. Fine. Useful conversation in some spaces, but I went looking at what happens when management misreads the neurodivergent person back. And £12,000 isn't even the biggest receipt I found. One of them was £45,147. So now I have questions, honestly, because when somebody takes longer to answer a question and the manager decides that means that's attitude, when direct communication becomes arrogant, when distress becomes too sensitive, when somebody doesn't perform remorse exactly the way the other person expects, and that becomes they don't care, we're no longer just talking about someone's internal RSD spiral, we're talking about an interpretation with organisational power behind it. And that can affect your performance review as an employee, your opportunities. It can lead to a disciplinary, your job, or apparently an employment tribunal. So this is what I want to talk about. Managers don't know how to support employees with rejection sensitivity, and it's costing not only them, there's wider costs here. But I know we've explained RSD to death. Now, if you've seen any of my tools, community, you would have seen I spent RSD is explained. You could have gone to TikTok and you've probably seen a lot of rejection sensitivity elements explained by various creators to you, maybe give or take 4,000 times or so. You know the videos, the ones where your manager sends that, can we have a quick chat? And your brain goes, excellent, lovely, it's been nice knowing everyone, I should probably update LinkedIn, maybe retrain, potentially leave the country. You know, when someone doesn't reply to your message and now you've somehow gone from they're probably busy to I have fundamentally misjudged this entire relationship in 7 minutes. Maybe you get feedback, this is really good, can you just change this section? And somehow your nervous system hears, we regret ever employing you. So yes, we know about the spiraling, we know about replaying the conversations, we know about sensitivity to criticism, we know about perceived rejection, perfectionism, people pleasing, avoidance, wanting to disappear off the face of the earth because somebody put a full stop at the end of the email. And that conversation matters, but it's becoming very samey because almost all of it focuses on what is a neurodivergent person interpreting incorrectly. And I think we've missed half of the interaction. Yeah, approximately 50%, because managers interpret things too. If I misinterpret my manager's short email, I might spend my evening spiraling. Then perhaps recognizing and regulating that it's all good, right? However, if my manager misinterprets me, here comes the labels. I'm difficult, defensive, arrogant, disengaged, not resilient enough, not collaborative, not remorseful, not a cultural fit. And the difference is their interpretation can become organisational fact. How, you may ask? Well, it can go in writing. It can travel between managers. It can appear in performance conversations. It can affect a promotion. It can become part of the disciplinary. And this is where power changes the conversation. Because yes, RSD can make somebody assign rejection when rejection wasn't intended, and intention versus impact, we can go on for a while. But managers can assign character where character wasn't actually evidenced. Both can happen. But one of those people usually has significantly more power over what happens next. So if you go back to the 12K receipt, right? Sophie Stone, who worked for publisher MA Business, she had raised a need for somewhere quiet at the company summer party because she was concerned about being overwhelmed. She knew herself, right? So she was like, actually, this is what I need to be able to access this space. Somewhere quiet at work party. That's the request. During a meeting involving workload and adjustments, the manager used words along the lines of "get back in your work box." I'm still not quite sure what that means, but I keep coming back to this phrase because was there a box in the employment contract? Did onboarding include a diagram? Because was it something like, welcome to MA Business, here's your laptop, here's your Wi-Fi password, please remain inside your allocated work box at all times. Like, be serious. But here's the legal nuance and why it matters. The tribunal did not find that the manager's purpose was to humiliate her. And I really want to sit with that. Because so much workplace harm happens without somebody twirling a moustache. Somebody generally thinks I was trying to move the conversation on. I didn't mean it like that. Wasn't my intention. It was only a phrase. I was talking about workload. And all of that may even be true. And yet, the intent is not the only thing happening in an interaction. The context matters. What was being discussed matters. What the organisation knew matters. The relationship to disability matters. The impact matters. What happens afterwards matters. The tribunal upheld a reasonable adjustment complaint. It upheld the disability harassment complaint related to the work box remark. And it upheld one victimisation complaint. There was other complaints, but they were dismissed. The eventual award was £10,000 for injury to feelings plus £2,000 interest. It's £12,000 in total, right? So again, before somebody arrives in the comments wearing a powdered wig, no, the phrase itself was not separately valued at £12,000. The sentence is not the whole case. It's a receipt for the culture around it. The £12,000 is a receipt for the culture around it. And honestly, I think that's more interesting anyway, because workplaces love inclusion. They love it until it requires something. Because this is what keeps getting me. Workplace loves inclusion when inclusion is conceptual. Policies, we have several. Values on the wall, training completed, neurodiversity awareness week, or menopause awareness week, whatever you want to call it, awareness week, we do it. Lovely graphics. Bring your whole self to work. Absolutely. As long as the whole self is convenient, responds quickly, communicates normally, doesn't require too much adaptation, doesn't interrupt workflow, and preferably doesn't make anyone feel uncomfortable. The real test of inclusion isn't what you say you believe. It's what happens when somebody needs something. What happens when the adjustment creates an extra decision. It's what happens when the employee needs more processing time. It's what happens when the feedback has to be delivered differently. It's what happens when the standard way you manage people doesn't work for this person. It is what happens when supporting something means you have to change something. That's the test. Inclusion is very easy when it costs you nothing. The interesting bit starts when it becomes inconvenient. I mean, think about it, right? There's another thing that's happening that really, really bothers me. We've put an extraordinarily a large amount of responsibility on neurodivergent employees to become phenomenally sophisticated interpreters of themselves. Knowing the diagnosis, knowing your triggers, knowing your access needs, knowing your communication style, knowing your nervous system, knowing how you process, knowing how you respond to feedback, knowing how you experience rejection, knowing how your executive functioning profile works, knowing what adjustments you need. Ask for it clearly, document it, explain it. Regulate yourself while you're explaining it. Do not get upset while explaining why getting upset is part of the thing you're asking support for. I mean, anything else? Would you like a PowerPoint, a handout, a small diagnostic quiz at the end? I mean, while sometimes the management standard is, I don't know, she comes across as difficult. After all the analysis, where the employee has to become a PhD in themselves, someone else can just say, I don't know. She just comes across as difficult. Excuse me? Apparently, I need enough self-awareness to deliver a TED Talk on my neurological functioning. You might need enough self-awareness to deliver that TED Talk on neurological functioning and your health experiences and co-occurring experiences. And somebody else just gets to say vibes. And that's what I want to challenge. We observe behaviour and hallucinate motive. Here's what I'm talking about. Workplaces do this constantly. Someone takes longer to answer. They're evasive. Someone communicates directly. They are rude. Someone asks lots of clarifying questions. They are difficult. Someone looks away during a difficult conversation. They're disengaged. Someone doesn't show emotion the way you expected. They don't care. Someone becomes visibly distressed after feedback. They are too sensitive. Someone works differently from everybody else, right? They're not a team player. Someone advocates strongly for an adjustment. They are demanding. Okay, let's pause, right? What did you actually observe and what did you make up? Because during yesterday's meeting, you interrupted the client 3 times. It's an observation. You are arrogant is a story. This report contains 6 errors is an observation. You don't care about quality is a story. You didn't respond for 2 days is an observation. You're disengaged is a story. And sometimes the story might turn out to be right. But you have to establish that. You can't just make up the motive and manage the motive you invented and then act surprised when things go sideways. And what's interesting is then I found this number when I was doing this research, right? 750%. That is the number, the increase, right? ADHD specifically related employment tribunal decisions increased from 6 in the first half of 2026, the number 6, right, to 51 in the first half of 2025. 750% increase. Now, I'm not doing any internet maths with you. I'm not going to wave around a giant percentage and pretend, well, there we go, managers are 750% worse now. That's not what the data says. Awareness changed, diagnosis changed in terms of how people was able to access it. Disclosure changed. People's willingness to challenge discrimination may have changed. Understanding of rights may have changed. There could be a lot of things sitting underneath the number, but the number still makes me ask, has management capability caught up? Because if employees increasingly understand their own neurodivergence, their own rejection sensitivity, but the workplace is still interpreting behaviour through the same narrow ideas of professionalism, we are always going to have a collision. And it's happening. Because £12,000 isn't even the biggest receipt. Which brings us to Lidl, because If £12,000 didn't get your attention, Lidl has entered the chat with £45,147 because that was the compensation awarded to former Lidl Deputy Store Manager Ryan Toghill. Evidence in that case included ADHD-related experiences such as needing more time to process questions, difficulty concentrating during conversations, significant anxiety in social and workplace situations, as well as rejection sensitivity. And during the disciplinary process, judgments were being made around his responses and his apparent remorse. And I got stuck on that word. I looked at that word remorse and I was like, what does that look like? No, seriously, what is the visual specification of remorse, right? I'm remorseful. Do I need to mask? So if I look down, if I cry, if I maintain eye contact, but not too much, though, presumably because then I'm too aggressive. Do I speak immediately, but not too quickly, because then maybe I'm defensive? How many seconds of silence communicates the right amount of remorse? What's the Rubik? Right? Remorse. Because the second you're evaluating someone's internal state by whether their external behaviour matches your expectation, you are interpreting. Now, that does not mean every conduct issues involves a neurodivergent person disappears, right? We're not saying that. Please don't do that thing, right? ADHD or any neurodivergence, rejection sensitivity, traits, whatever is there as the journey right now is not a get out of disciplinary free card. We are not playing Monopoly with people's careers, right? Autism is not diplomatic immunity. Rejection sensitivity does not mean nobody can hold you accountable. Sometimes someone has behaved badly. Sometimes someone has lied. Sometimes they broke a rule. Sometimes the work isn't good enough. We live in a society, consequences still exist. The question is, could disability be relevant to what I'm seeing? And did you bother investigating before deciding you already knew what the behaviour meant? Because what looks like attitude can sometimes be processing. And what looks like indifference can sometimes be communication difference. Sometimes attitude is attitude, but your job is to figure out which one you're dealing with, not vibe it out. So Capgemini, please explain this to me, because honestly, this one particularly annoys me, because an organisation commissions a workplace needs assessment. Fantastic. The assessment recommends support. Also good. Recommendations include achievable and realistic tasks, training on neurodiversity in general, and ADHD awareness training, workplace coaching involving the line manager as well, right? So we've done the assessment. We've identified the barriers. We've got some recommendations. Some of them cost absolutely nothing to implement. We know what is supposed to happen. And then you don't implement then. Not one iota. I'm sorry. What exactly was the assessment for? Was it for decor? Did you think the PDF would sit in an inbox and radiate accessibility? Don't worry, Sarah. The adjustments are happening energetically. You'll receive them if you just close your eyes. No. A workplace needs assessment sitting in somebody's inbox is not a reasonable adjustment. The document isn't the adjustment is the adjustment. And organisations do this with process all the time. They confuse, we referred them with, we supported them. They confuse, we had a meeting with, we resolved it. They confuse, we have a policy with, people can access it. They confuse, we commissioned an assessment with, we implemented their recommendations. No, the thing has to actually change something. Otherwise, you've just created paperwork about the barrier. And before you start with, so managers can't give feedback now. And I know exactly where some people will go next, because that's what I hear, right? And no, you can give feedback. Please give feedback. Sometimes the work isn't to standard. There, I said it, which is why the Shevlin case is useful here to talk about, because Thomas Shevlin had ADHD and dyslexia traits. His manager raised issues including rushing, typos, incorrect capitals, and sentences that just didn't make sense. His discrimination and harassment claims failed. And I think that this case needs to sit in this conversation, because otherwise we end up with a ridiculous version of neuroinclusion where everybody's terrified to say, this isn't standard. Because sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the spreadsheet is wrong. Sometimes the email is unclear. Sometimes you did miss the deadline. Sometimes the client should not have been spoken to like that. Sometimes the behaviour needs correcting. That's management. The difference is this report contains 6 errors. I need you to proof it before it goes to the client. It's feedback. You missed the agreed deadlines twice. Let's understand what's happening and what needs to change. It's feedback. During yesterday's meeting, you interrupted the client 3 times. I need you to let them finish before responding, just so that we can really capture what they're saying. Feedback. You're arrogant. Based on what? You're difficult. Based on what? You don't seem committed. Based on what? You don't look sorry. According to what? Because the question isn't, can you criticize a neurodivergent employee? Of course you can. Question is, are you describing their work or are you inventing their character? And when I say criticize, again, we are talking about the work. Critical feedback that helps to improve the work. Because are you describing their work or are you inventing their character are not the same thing. And I don't think this is just a rejection sensitivity issue here. Because I don't actually need every manager in Britain to become an RSD expert. Would it help if they understood it? Sure, but there's only so much you can really understand. I think the bigger problem is more fundamental. Too much management, too many decisions are being done on vibes. She seems disengaged. He's got an attitude. They're not collaborative. She intimidates people. He isn't committed. They're not a cultural fit. She doesn't seem sorry. Okay, based on what? What happened? When? When did the person actually say? What expectations have been communicated? What was the impact? What would good look like next time? Is there a disability or access context you need to understand? What adjustment has already been agreed? What have you actually done? Because if you cannot tell me the observational behaviour, the impact and the expected alternative, you might not be giving feedback. You might just be giving me your impression of a person. And impressions have bias baked into them, and nobody wants to eat that. And so this is how small things become expensive things, right? 2026, a HR survey found that 68% of respondents said people issues had escalated because of poor handling or delay. And I believe it, because nobody wakes up on a Tuesday and thinks, do you know what? I fancy an employment tribunal. Doesn't that sound fun? Usually there's an origin story. Something small happens, nobody deals with it properly. One person makes an assumption, the other person reacts to the assumption. Communication gets worse, somebody says, we'll come back to this. They did not come back to this. And an adjustment sits unresolved. The employee stops trusting the manager. The manager starts describing the employee as difficult. Everyone starts documenting everybody. Now we're no longer resolving the original issue, we're building evidence and grievance, appeal, ACAS, lawyers, tribunals. And suddenly, everyone is sitting there looking traumatized, asking, how did we get here? Gradually. You got there gradually. The tribunal is often just the final receipt for a management problem that started months earlier. So what do you actually do? And here's the frustrating bit. Supporting somebody with rejection sensitivity at work doesn't require a 47-page framework. You need to manage properly. And there are a few areas to look at, right? No is the first word. If something relevant has been disclosed or an adjustment has been agreed, make sure that the relevant people actually know what they're supposed to know. Not everybody, the people who had to implement it. After knowing, ask. Don't Google ADHD, rejection sensitivity, read 3 bullets and decide you now understand. Janet, ask Janet. Ask Janet specifically, what is the barrier? What helps? What doesn't? What makes feedback easier to process? What creates unnecessary friction? Those are just a few questions. Just a few. There are many, many more. But either way, If you even just ask those, you'll be ahead of the game. Adjust. Now, if you've agreed an adjustment, actually adjust something. I know, radical. And honestly, the amount of times I've heard, we did do that once, didn't we? We haven't done it since. We should do that again. All right? Adjust something. Which brings me to the second point. If you document it, you write down what you've agreed, who's doing what, when it's happening, when you're reviewing it, that whole piece around or rhetoric around, we did used to do that. It did work really well. We stopped doing it. Because 6 months later, nobody should be recreating like workplace history through Outlook searches and vibes. And then once you ask, you adjust, you document, manage, set expectations, give feedback, address performance, have difficult conversations, follow up. It's not managerial witness protection, right? You're allowed to still manage people. We're not lowering the bar. We're making sure somebody can see the bar, understand the bar, and have a fair route to reaching it. Oftentimes, people might be able to see the bar, don't really understand the bar, can't really reach it. Can they see the bar, understand the bar, and have a fair route to reaching it? So let's go back to rejection sensitivity. Let's still keep talking about rejection sensitivity. Let's talk about the spiraling. Criticism can feel enormous. Let's talk about perceived rejection. Let's talk about overthinking. Let's talk about how silence can feel loaded. Let's talk about the nervous system response. All of that matters. But I want us to add another question to the conversation. While we're asking neurodivergent employees, could you be misinterpreting this situation? Maybe managers should also occasionally ask themselves, could I be misrepresenting this person? Because one misinterpretation may cause an internal spiral. The other might enter an appraisal, a disciplinary, a dismissal, or an employment tribunal. And that power difference matters. The bigger question, and actually this is the part I want to leave you with. If you're watching this as somebody who experiences rejection sensitivity and you've ever walked out of a workplace conversation thinking that's not what I said, that's not what I meant, somehow that's now who I am, I understand why that can stay with you. Being misunderstood is difficult enough. Being misunderstood by somebody who has power over your livelihood is something else entirely. And if that reaction follows you home, if you're still replaying the conversation hours later, judging yourself, questioning what you said, wondering whether you're too much, too sensitive, too difficult, that part deserves support too. But if you're watching this as a manager, a HR leader, a people director, somebody responsible for how decisions get made about human beings at work, I have a different question for you. How much of what your organization currently calls performance, attitude, engagement, professionalism, remorse, cultural fit is based on observational evidence? And how much of it is somebody else's interpretation? Because once an interpretation enters a performance review, a disciplinary process, an adjustment decision, a grievance, an escalation, it isn't just one person's opinion anymore. It has become part of the organizational system. And that's where I think this conversation gets considerably bigger than rejection sensitivity. Because the question isn't simply, do our managers understand RSD? The question is, do we have the conditions, systems and decision-making discipline that stop one person's interpretation quietly becoming somebody else's career's reality? That is a completely different standard. And that's why I keep coming back to Sophie Stone. She asked whether she could have somewhere quiet at a company summer party. That's the beginning, somewhere between that request and the end of the story, that there was a £12,000 tribunal award. And elsewhere, another receipt reached £45,147. The request wasn't extraordinary. And honestly, the management failures we've been looking at weren't particularly extraordinary either. That's the worrying part. Because if workplace discrimination always requires somebody to be spectacularly awful, we could just tell people, don't be spectacularly awful. Sorted. But sometimes it starts much smaller. A comment, an assumption, an adjustment nobody follows up, a reaction somebody interprets as character, a manager who generally just didn't intend harm, a system that allows subjective judgment to travel without enough challenge, and a workplace that doesn't understand the significance of that gap until somebody hands them the receipt. So before you think of telling someone to get back in their box, make sure the box is accessible in the first place. And maybe check who put them in the box to begin with.